I get this question all the time. Joe, how do you mix virtual drums? Or more broadly, how do you mix virtual instruments? I'm going to answer that question today, but the answer might not be what you expect, especially if you're new around here. What I'll show you in this video will open up a whole new world of possibilities where instead of relying on memorizing settings and presets, you'll intuitively mix things effortlessly. Stick around until the end and I'll show you how I apply this on a drum mix. My first job out of college was as a sales engineer at Sweetwater, so I spent all day on the phone talking to customers, selling music and audio equipment. I got a call one afternoon from a guy who said, "Hey, I want to buy a Neumann U87. Now, if you're not familiar, U87 is like a $3,600 mic. I got excited because I was a commission sales guy. That would have paid me a nice, hefty commission. But instead of just asking for his credit card number, I said, "Cool, tell me a little bit about what you're doing." Come to find out, this person had heard that the U87 is the best mic out there and wanted to record vocals. Problem was, he wanted to plug that beautiful microphone into the little 1/8-inch headphone jack on the side of his laptop. Doesn't work, right? You have to plug a microphone into a preamp that has phantom power to power the microphone into an audio interface, or maybe the preamp is on the audio interface. You need more than just he wanted a U87 and then a cable that goes from XLR to 1/8-inch. I can't remember if I made that sale or not, but it stuck in my brain because I had to kind of backpedal with the customer and say, "Hey, I know you want to spend $3,600. It literally will not work if I sell you this today. What would be better is for me to help you understand what it is you actually need, and then we can go from there." Because if he's wanting to plug into his laptop, then he doesn't have an audio interface, which means he probably doesn't have a way to connect headphones. So he needs more than he thinks he needs. He may still want the $3,600 mic, but he's going to need several other pieces of equipment just to make it functional, much less make it useful for him. I tell you this story to illustrate a problem that we all face. We want nice, simple, magical solutions to our problems, but reality is usually more complicated. When it comes to mixing, people want a list to memorize. They want a list of settings to use in all these different scenarios so that they can just pull from that list and make things sound good. But as you'll soon find out, that's almost never the case. My dad was a doctor. Every sports team I played on, he had delivered at least one kid on the team. And he is a fountain of knowledge. He's from the era of the small town family doctor. He delivered babies. He saw patients. He made rounds at the hospital. Like, he did everything. And he knows everything. I could call him right now and say, "Hey, what's the deal with diabetes?" or whatever. And he could give me, I could ask him about specific medication. He could tell me what the dosage is, what it's used for, what the side effects are, why it's good, why it's bad, how it works in the body. Just an insane amount of understanding. Now, I went to audio school. I did not go to medical school. But I imagine a big part of studying for exams in med school is simply just rote memorization. I got to memorize all these things and then spit them back out on the test. But if I'm going to see a doctor, I don't want the doctor that just memorized and then spit out the answers. I want a doctor who has not just knowledge, but understanding. I want him to understand how the human body works, how illness works, and how to fix whatever's going on with me. So I don't just want knowledge, I want understanding. It's the same thing with mixing, albeit fewer people die as a result of a bad mix. Instead of aiming for, I'm going to memorize what to do, your goal instead should be, I want to have a better understanding of what's happening. If you develop a deep understanding of how music works, of what makes a piece of music sound good, you no longer have to rely on memorized settings. You intuitively know which way to go and what to do next. And the good news is, once you acquire that knowledge, you can figure out what to do in any situation. So back to what we talked about at the beginning. Someone sends you tracks to mix. You don't even have to know if they're virtual or not, or where they came from. You can just listen to them and let them tell you exactly what needs to happen for the next step of the mix. Now, this does take time, but you can develop this skill. And once you've developed this skill, it's kind of like riding a bike. You have it for life. So what specifically is this skill I'm talking about? It's critical listening skills, the ability to listen to something, to understand deeply what's happening, and then to know what tools to use, if any, to make it sound like it needs to sound. Here's the truth. It doesn't matter what the source is. You send me a song to mix, I literally could not care less where it came from. I'm just going to listen to it and make decisions. And that's the secret to all of this. It's not, I memorized, if it's virtual drums, I use this EQ. If it's real drums, I use it. Don't care. I've mixed so many songs where I had no clue if it was real drums or if it was Easy Drummer or Superior Drummer or Logic Drummer. I literally don't care because I apply the same approach and the same process to everything that I mix. It's kind of like I'm agnostic. I don't care about the reality of where it came from. I care about what it sounds like right now in my session, and I'm going to make decisions based on what it sounds like. But the secret here is comparison. I'm comparing what I have to some sort of ideal. I'm comparing this to that. Now, what is the that? The that is great sounding music. I've listened to great sounding music, specifically here in my mix position. So when I hear your drums versus my favorite sounding drums, I can hear A, that they're different, and B, I can start to have an idea of what would get your drums closer to those drums. The alternative is, instead of comparing this to that, you're comparing this to nothing. You're just saying, well, I got a sound. I guess I'll throw an EQ on there and see what happens. Or I guess I'll just compress it because I saw that guy on YouTube use a compressor. Not a great way to work. You end up just doing a bunch of stuff and you make it sound different. And it might sound better, probably will sound worse. And you just wasted a couple hours of your life because you didn't know where you were going. So how do we achieve this skill? How do we develop this craft of critical listening? There's 3 components to it: listening, witnessing, and practicing. Let's talk about those 3. First up, listening. You got to listen to great music on your system. That is very simple. That is something you can do for free, sitting in your mix position. We all listen to music, of course, and you might think, Joe, nah, that's dumb. It's not dumb. You'd be surprised how many people want to make their mixes sound great, but they actually don't know what great sounds like, specifically sitting in this chair between these 2 speakers or using the headphones that you use to mix. It's a common mistake. It's one that you have to rectify. I'm not talking about reference mixes, by the way. When I'm mixing a song, I don't flip over and listen to a pro mix and then flip back to my mix. I don't find that to be all that helpful. Instead, I make it a point to regularly sit here and listen to great music, and I become accustomed to what that sounds like so that when I switch over to my mix, I can instantly spot the flaws, instantly spot the parts that need work to make it sound more like those pro-level reference mixes. Second thing, first is listening, second is witnessing. Might sound weird. I'm talking about an easy way to skyrocket your progress is to witness someone else who has better ears than you, how they listen to something and how they pick out things to fix or to address in a mix. What do I mean? I've done this so many times where I'm working on a mixing tutorial and I'll say, do you hear that whistling sound on the vocal? It's really annoying. And people will say, no, I don't hear that. And then I'll go show them where it is. I'll emphasize it with EQ, and then I'll pull it down so that it goes away. And then I'll say, do you hear it now? And I'll turn the EQ on and off, and they'll say, wow, before you showed that to me, I didn't even hear that as a problem. Now that you've identified it for me, it's the only thing that I do hear in the mix. This is what I'm talking about. It's kind of like chess grandmasters. I play chess casually. I'm decent. But a grandmaster and I could both look at the same chessboard and see vastly different things. I see one move, and the grandmaster will see 20 moves into the future, right? Because they're so much more familiar with the material in front of them. It's the same thing with mixing. If you haven't done this for decades and decades and you're still struggling to get mixes that you're really proud of, chances are there's someone else who has done this and can hear things that maybe you can't hear yet. And the good news is you can develop that skill. You can get to the point where you can hear what they hear. I tell my members all the time, I don't have super special ears. I got normal, everyday ears. I'm pretty sure I've got some ringing in there too. So not perfect. I wasn't born different. I just developed a skill. Just like anyone with fingers can learn to play guitar, anyone with ears and the ability to hear can develop a good set of ears, golden ears as they call them. I'm not magical. I just worked hard at it and got good at it. The third piece, witnessing or listening, witnessing, and then practicing. You got to work on this, right? You got to know what good sounds like. You got to have someone else help you hear the things that you need to listen for, but then ultimately you got to put in the reps and try things on your own. Do you want to know an easy way to do all three of these? My VIP Gold membership. Multiple times a month, I host Mix Critique live streams where I critique your mixes, and we all develop our critical listening skills. Plus, add in the monthly recording and mixing challenges, and that gives you plenty of excuses to put in the practice and further hone your skills. You can try out VIP for a full month for free. Just go to homestudiocorner.com/VIP. Now, before I open up a drum session and show you the way I approach mixing drums, I want to talk a little bit about the truth about virtual instruments. They usually sound pretty good right out of the box. That means you might not have to do much to get them to work in the mix. Not always, but it's possible. This is the dirty little secret that I've been preaching for almost 16 years on this channel. If you get it right at the source, if you make the raw source material sound amazing, you don't have to work very hard during the mix session to make it sound incredible. This is true for setting up microphones as well as choosing virtual drums and virtual instruments. It's all the same. That's why when I receive tracks from someone to mix, I really don't care if they tell me if it's real or fake, because no matter what it is, I use my ears to make decisions about what to do to them. And one of the options, and this is the thing that most people forget, by the way, is to do nothing. Perhaps the track needs nothing. That is a valid option, and I would argue one of the best decisions you can make. Too many times people will put stuff on there because they think they're supposed to when the track worked perfectly by itself with nothing on it. Okay, I want to demonstrate a quick mix of some virtual drums that I have here. This is a song that we're mixing inside VIP this month. The song itself has like 92 tracks, but here are the drum tracks. These are from Easy Drummer. My approach to mixing, in case you haven't learned yet, is to first get the static mix, then fix any big problems, and then do top-down mixing. In that order, you can mix things very quickly, especially if they're virtual and they already sound pretty good, which is the case here. Let's take a quick listen to these drums. These are just the raw drums with all the faders at 0. Here we go. So right out of the gate, they sound pretty good, and they already sound pretty balanced. The one issue I hear is just they're just kind of quiet. So I want to get them up to a level that I'm used to mixing. By the way, always leave your volume knob at the same spot. Once you find a good spot where you can mix nice and loud without clipping your master fader, leave it there for all eternity. Use super glue. Stick it in place. Don't use super glue. But I'm just going to turn up. I'm going to leave the faders at 0, so I still have a lot of resolution down here. I'm going to use this trim knob at the top to just turn these drums up to something that feels a little better. All right, I dig that. That already sounds pretty good. Now I'm going to kind of rebalance this, starting with kick and snare, and then go with the rest. Let's get kick and snare sounding good. We've got 2 kick drums, 2 snare drums. I've checked the phase already. They sound good as is. So let's just start with kick, and then we'll go snare next. I want more beef out of it. We could do that with EQ, or could we maybe do it with level? The kick in, this one is very clicky. This one, the out should be a lot beefier. Yeah, it's a little dull. It's a lot quieter to my ear. So instead of grabbing EQ and going nuts, I'm just going to turn the kick out up some more. That makes my face do things, which means we're already off to a good start. Let's check snare. We'll start with snare top. Now let's see what the bottom adds. Sometimes the bottom gives it just a ksh, but sometimes the bottom has some beef to it. Or the way it interacts with the top adds a little more beefiness. I like both of those settings. We pushed it up a good bit past 0. I'm cool with that. We'll leave it there for now. Reverse snare, we're not going to worry about that. It's not in this section. Toms. So we receive the toms as just a stereo file. That's fine. Let's just set the level using that. Cool. Ideally, I'd have multiple, a microphone for each tom, but if not, I just use that and I'm happy. Hi-hat, let's get that in there. Okay, hi-hat is real quiet. I don't always use a hi-hat mic, but if I do, I might as well hear it. Let's go back to the beginning of the beat. Cool, and then let's bring in the overheads. And then we got two room mics here. One stereo, one mono. Let's see how stereo sounds first, then we'll bring in mono if we want to. Yeah, when I pushed it up real loud, it was too obvious. By the way, this is a mistake I hear all the time. If you're new to mixing drums, welcome. It's super fun. Go easy on the room mics. I've heard this so many times. People will crank the room because rooms are cool, but then the drums just sound like a mushy mess. Like, use the room mics, but don't make them the loudest thing. If they drown out everything else, you've done something wrong. And this mono mic, let's see what that sounds like. Kind of sounds like it's been compressed. I could take or leave it. Let's just add it in, see how it sounds. I don't really hear anything. I'm going to turn up the trim on that just to see what happens. One of the ways you can decide if you like something or not is get it set in the mix somewhere and then just hit the mute button on it. See if you miss it when it's gone. If not, get rid of that sucker. I'll leave it. It adds a little bit of something to the kick and snare. It's not much, but it's kind of interesting. And that's the kind of channel we could maybe later add like crap loads of compression. My mouth just made a weird sound. Crap loads of compression, maybe distortion, and see. But this is literally my process. This is my process, by the way, for the whole mix. I'll do this for the bass tracks, for the guitar tracks, for the drum tracks. Just get them all blended in nicely. And then, so we've set our levels. Next step is we fix big problems. I don't hear any big problems. Why? Because it's virtual. And a lot of times they fix those big problems way back there at the sample stage. They probably already have some EQ and definitely probably have some compression on them. Cool. Great. People always ask, should I compress them? If they need compression, compress them. Should I EQ them? If it needs EQ, EQ them. When I listen to this, I don't hear big problems. I hear some little EQ things that I'm going to want to do in the mix. But as far as big problems that would mess up my top-down mix, I don't hear any problems. So that's when I move on to my top-down mix, which is where I use one compressor and one EQ on the entire drum mix and just see what happens. See if I can make it rock with just these two. Now, you got to be careful. You can overdo things, especially with compression at this level. But I found that there are many times, especially when it's virtual drums, where my whole drum mix is right here. 2 plugins, done. Would you like to 2 plugins and done? Of course you would. Let's see what happens. Since it sounds good already, there's no big problems. I'm going to compress first. I like that compression. It's not a ton. It just kind of tightens everything up. And then I'm going to use some EQ now. Give it a little more low end, 220 and below. Maybe 110 and below. If anything, we could bring the kick up now. The compressor's responding well to the snare, but not the kick as much, so we could probably goose the kick a little bit. Yeah, so now I observe from here, that's the overall tone feels good. I'm gonna need to EQ those kicks. There's a little bit too much low mid, man, I'll keep whistling today. There's a little bit of like low mid grossness there that I want to address just on the kick drums. But overall, with just one plugin that has an EQ and a compressor, we've gone from this to this. Not night and day, but definitely closer to where we want to be. And I foresee, if I had to predict, I'm not going to do much more to this, and it's going to be pretty close to ready. Let's add a bus for these kicks. We'll just put a capital K there, and let me just EQ it real quick. Yeah, 160 was bugging me. Now... Now, once we get into the mix, we may find once we add bass, the kick is too much. But for now, good starting point. This is where I would say, I'm done for now. Let's move on to other tracks, and we'll come back to it later. I used 2 plugins. And it's not just a gimmick. I legit feel happy with that, partially because it's virtual drums, partially because of the beauties of top-down mixing, partially because we took our time getting the static mix right. It's all additive. It all kind of adds together to create something awesome. Hey, if you want to mix this exact song, we're doing a mixing tournament this month, but the tracks will be available even if you join much later in the future. Just look up the mixing challenge from March 2025. Take VIP for a test drive for free for a full month. Go to homestudiocorner.com/VIP. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked this, there's another video on mixing real drums. The process is pretty similar, but you can watch that here now.